Love can wait, but friendship can't. They'll be here after you, my girlfriend said. I packed my bags that night without a word. I never thought I'd be the guy writing this. But here I am, 26 years old, sitting in an empty apartment that doesn't feel like home yet, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. My name is Ethan, and 2 weeks ago I walked away from a 2-year relationship with my girlfriend Marissa because I finally accepted something I'd been ignoring for months. I wasn't her boyfriend, I was just another member of her friend group, except I came with benefits and paid half the rent. Let me back up and explain how I got here, because honestly, even I didn't see this coming when we first started dating. Marissa was 24 when we met, funny, energetic, and yeah, she had this tight-knit group of friends she called the squad, which I thought was kind of cute at first. There was Qley, the self-appointed mom of the group who organized everything, Adrian, the guy who always had an opinion about everything, Tasha, who documented every single moment on social media, and Finn, the quiet one who somehow always ended up being the tiebreaker in group decisions. At first, I thought it was sweet how close they all were. You know, like those friendships you see in movies where everyone just gets each other. They had matching group Halloween costumes every year, coordinated birthday surprises, and this whole shared history going back to college that they loved to reference in conversations I wasn't part of. I figured once Marissa and I got more serious, I'd naturally become part of that dynamic. But that's not what happened at all. Instead, I just became the guy who was always waiting, always understanding, always coming in second, third, or honestly, sixth place when you counted all of them plus whatever plans they had that week. The thing is, it didn't start out bad. It was gradual, like watching water slowly erode stone until one day you realize there's a canyon where solid ground used to be. Our first few months were great because we were in that honeymoon phase where nothing else matters. But around month 4, I started noticing patterns. We'd make plans for Friday night, and then Thursday afternoon she'd text saying Qley had a bad day and they were doing girls' night, or that Adrian's band was playing and the whole squad was going. I'd say sure, because what kind of controlling jerk tells their girlfriend she can't see her friends, right? Except it kept happening, over and over, until I realized I wasn't postponing our plans occasionally. I was just perpetually rescheduling my life around her social calendar. Every weekend was planned around what the squad was doing. Every holiday involved coordinating with 5 other people's schedules, and every conversation about our future somehow circled back to making sure it didn't interfere with the group dynamic. I started feeling less like a partner and more like an accessory she brought out when the squad wasn't available. 6 months ago, we moved in together, and I thought maybe that would change things, that living together would mean we'd finally have our own space and our own rhythms separate from everyone else. I was so wrong it's almost funny now. If anything, moving in together just made it easier for the squad to treat our apartment like their personal hangout spot. They'd show up unannounced, crash on our couch after nights out, and Marissa never saw anything wrong with it. I'd come home from work exhausted, hoping for a quiet evening with my girlfriend, and find all 5 of them in our living room having an impromptu movie marathon. When I'd gently suggest that maybe we could have some nights just for us, Marissa would look at me like I'd suggested something completely unreasonable and tell me they were her family, that I needed to understand how important they were to her. And I did understand, I really did. But I also started to understand that in her hierarchy of importance, I was nowhere near the top. The breaking point came on our 2-year anniversary, and looking back, I should have seen it coming from miles away. I'd planned everything weeks in advance because I knew how complicated her schedule got with the squad. I made reservations at her favorite Italian restaurant, the one where we had our first date, and I'd bought tickets to see this band she'd been obsessed with for months. I was so excited. I'd even bought a new shirt and spent way too much time picking out the perfect card. The morning of our anniversary, she woke up smiling, kissed me, and told me she couldn't wait for tonight. I felt this wave of relief wash over me because part of me had been terrified she'd forgotten or that something would come up. But I should have trusted my instincts, because around 2 in the afternoon, her phone started blowing up with messages. I watched her face change as she read them. That expression I'd come to know and dread, the one that meant the squad needed something and I was about to be disappointed again. She looked up at me with those apologetic eyes and said, "So, Tasha just broke up with her boyfriend, like a really bad breakup, and everyone's getting together tonight to support her." I just stared at her, waiting for the part where she'd say she'd go for an hour and then come back, or that she'd explained it was our anniversary and couldn't make it, but that part never came. I managed to say, "Marissa, it's our anniversary," and she actually looked confused, like she didn't see the problem. Then she hit me with the words that ended everything. Babe, we can celebrate tomorrow. Love can wait, but friendship can't. They were here before you, and they'll be here after. Those words hit me like a physical blow, and I think that's when something inside me just broke. Not dramatically, not with anger, just this quiet snapping sound that only I could hear. I didn't argue, didn't try to convince her to stay. I just said okay and watched her get ready to leave. She kissed me on the cheek, told me I was the best for understanding, and walked out the door to go meet her friends, leaving me standing in our apartment with restaurant reservations and concert tickets I'd never use. I sat there for a long time after she left, just thinking about everything, about all the times I'd come second to the squad. I thought about my college graduation 6 months ago, where she'd left early because Qley needed help with some emergency that turned out to be deciding which shoes to buy. I thought about my brother's wedding where she'd spent half the reception on her phone coordinating some squad drama instead of dancing with me. I thought about the time my mom was in the hospital and I'd asked her to come with me, but she'd told me she'd already committed to a squad road trip and couldn't bail on them. Every single memory was the same pattern: me waiting, me understanding, me being the one who was supposed to be flexible while her friends got her best time, her energy, her priority. That night, while she was out with the squad, I opened my laptop and started looking at apartments. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just tired, exhausted from always being the backup plan, from feeling like I was dating 5 people instead of 1, from coming in 6th place in my own relationship. I found a small 1-bedroom place across town, nothing fancy, but it was available immediately, and before I could talk myself out of it, I filled out the application. When Marissa came home that night, drunk and happy and full of stories about how they'd cheered Tasha up, I was in bed pretending to be asleep. She curled up next to me, whispered that she loved me, and I lay there in the dark thinking about how love apparently only mattered when it was convenient. The next morning, I got the email that my application had been approved, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life, because I was essentially planning my escape while living with someone who had no idea what was coming. I'd gotten approved for the apartment, signed the lease, and started the slow process of moving my stuff out while Marissa was at work or with the squad, which honestly gave me plenty of opportunities since she was barely home anyway. I'd take a box or 2 each day, small things she wouldn't notice immediately: my books, my winter clothes, that gaming console I'd bought before we moved in together. It felt surreal, like I was erasing myself from our life one piece at a time, and the weirdest part was how easy it was because she genuinely didn't notice anything different. She'd come home, talk about her day, about something funny Qley said or some drama with Tasha's ex, and I'd just nod along while mentally cataloging what I still needed to pack. I'd taken 3 days off work to do the final move, timing it for when I knew she'd be gone on a weekend trip the squad had planned to some cabin upstate. She'd invited me weeks ago, but I told her I couldn't get the time off work, which was a lie, but she'd just shrugged and said that was fine, that it was kind of a squad bonding thing anyway. The morning they left, I helped her load her bags into Qley's car, kissed her goodbye, and watched them drive away, knowing it was the last time I'd do any of those things. As soon as they were out of sight, I called my buddy Marcus and his brother, and we spent the entire day moving everything I owned out of that apartment. My furniture, my kitchen stuff, even the TV I'd bought, everything that was mine came with me. By the time we were done, my old bedroom looked like a ghost lived there: empty closet, bare walls, just the furniture that had been Marissa's to begin with. I left my key on the kitchen counter with a note that just said I was done, that I couldn't keep being her last priority, that I hoped she'd understand someday, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I didn't write some long emotional letter because honestly, what was there to say that I hadn't already tried to communicate 100 different ways? I thought about texting her, giving her a heads up, but I knew if I did that she'd either try to talk me out of it or she'd call the squad, and they'd all show up to stage some kind of intervention. So I just left, closed the door behind me, and drove to my new place with this strange mixture of relief and sadness sitting heavy in my chest. She didn't notice anything was wrong until she got back Sunday night, and I know this because my phone started exploding around 11 p.m. with calls and texts. At first they were confused, asking where I was and why my stuff was gone. Then they turned angry, accusing me of abandoning her without warning. Then they got desperate, begging me to come back so we could talk about this. I ignored all of them, every single call and text, because I knew that if I engaged at all, I'd get sucked back into explaining and justifying and defending my decision to people who had never respected it in the first place. But Marissa wasn't the type to just let things go, and apparently neither was the squad, because by Monday afternoon my phone was getting messages from all of them. Qley sent me this long text about how I was breaking up their family, how Marissa was devastated, how I was being selfish and cruel. Adrian sent a message calling me an immature jerk who couldn't handle his girlfriend having friends. Tasha sent me screenshots of Marissa crying, like that was somehow going to make me feel guilty enough to come back. Finn, who I'd always thought was the reasonable one, texted saying, "Hey man, we all want to sit down and talk this through. Running away isn't the answer." I blocked Marissa's number after the 50th text, and I thought that would be the end of it, that eventually they'd realize I was serious and leave me alone. I should have known better, because I'd made one stupid mistake in my rush to leave. I'd forgotten that Marcus was friends with Adrian from some softball league they both played in years ago. I didn't even think about that connection until Tuesday morning when Marcus called me sounding uncomfortable and asked if I told anyone where my new place was. Apparently, Adrian had reached out to him asking if he knew where I'd moved to, playing it off all casual like he just wanted to drop off some of my mail that had been delivered to the old apartment. Marcus, being a good friend, had told him he didn't know and wasn't getting involved, but the damage was already done because now the squad knew that Marcus had helped me move, which meant they knew he knew where I was. I told Marcus not to worry about it, that I'd handle it, but I felt this sinking feeling in my gut because I knew exactly what was coming next. Wednesday evening, I was in my new apartment, finally starting to unpack and make the place feel like mine, when someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Marcus knew to text before coming over, so I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach drop. All 5 of them were standing in my hallway, Marissa in front looking determined. The squad fanned out behind her like some kind of emotional SWAT team. I stood there trying to figure out how they'd found me. And then I remembered that Marcus had posted a picture on Instagram a few days ago from a coffee shop that was literally across the street from my building, the kind of neighborhood spot that only locals would know about. They must have seen it, put 2 and 2 together, and somehow tracked down which building I was in, probably by checking the apartment listings in the area until they found one that matched the timeline. I didn't open the door, just stood there frozen, trying to comprehend what kind of person brings their entire friend group to confront their ex at his new apartment. Marissa knocked again, louder this time, and I heard her voice through the door. "Ethan, I know you're in there. We need to talk. You can't just throw away 2 years without a conversation." Then Qley's voice joined in. "We drove all the way across town. You at least owe us a conversation." Part of me wanted to open the door and explain everything one more time, to make her understand why I'd left, but I'd spent 2 years trying to make her understand, and it had never worked. So instead, I pulled out my phone and called building security, told them I had unwanted visitors who wouldn't leave. I felt ridiculous doing it, like I was overreacting, but at the same time, what was I supposed to do? Let them bully their way into my apartment so they could gang up on me about how wrong I was? I listened through the door as security showed up and asked them to leave, heard Marissa arguing, "But he's my boyfriend. I have a right to talk to him," and heard Qley trying to explain that this was just a misunderstanding. Security wasn't having it though, told them they needed to leave the property or they'd call the police, and after a few more minutes of heated discussion, I heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. I stood at my window and watched them all pile into Qley's car, saw Marissa looking back up at my building with this expression I couldn't quite read, somewhere between disbelief and anger, and honestly, I felt nothing but exhaustion. The texts started up again after they left. Angry ones now. Messages calling me a coward for not facing them, saying I owed Marissa closure, that real men don't run away from their problems. I turned my phone off completely and sat in my empty apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. 3 weeks passed, and I started feeling like myself again, which sounds dramatic, but it's true. I hadn't realized how much of my energy had been going into managing Marissa's schedule and her feelings and her squad's constant presence in our lives until all of that was suddenly gone. My new apartment was small, but it was mine, and I could come home after work and just exist without wondering if I'd find 5 people camped out on my couch or if the plans I'd made would get canceled last minute. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during the relationship, guys from college who'd stopped inviting me places because I always had to check with Marissa first, and the answer was usually no because the squad had something planned. Marcus and I started a weekly poker night. Nothing fancy, just a few guys hanging out without anyone documenting it for social media or turning it into a whole production. About a month after the breakup, I met someone at a coffee shop near my office. Her name was Sarah, she was 25, worked in graphic design, and the first thing I noticed about her was that she was sitting alone, actually alone, reading a book and drinking coffee without her phone even on the table. We started talking, exchanged numbers, and went out for dinner that weekend. The whole experience felt foreign to me, like I'd forgotten what it was like to have someone's undivided attention for an entire evening. Sarah didn't check her phone once during dinner, didn't mention having to coordinate with anyone else about anything. And when I asked if she wanted to do something the following weekend, she just said yes without having to check 3 other people's calendars first. It wasn't serious yet, we were just getting to know each other, but it felt like breathing fresh air after being stuck in a crowded room for too long. Around that same time, I started hearing things through mutual friends about how the squad was falling apart. I didn't go looking for this information, it just came to me the way gossip does in overlapping social circles. Apparently, Adrian had gotten engaged to someone he'd been dating long distance, and suddenly he wasn't available for the constant hangouts and emergency squad meetings because he was busy planning a wedding and visiting his fiancée in another state. Qley had gotten a job offer in Seattle and was moving across the country in a couple months, which meant the self-appointed mom of the group was abandoning ship. But the real drama, the truly ironic part that I heard about from 3 different people, was that Tasha and Finn had started hooking up and were now officially dating, which had completely destroyed the group dynamic that Marissa had been so protective of. I heard through Marcus, who heard it from Adrian before he peaced out, that Marissa was losing it over Finn and Tasha getting together. Apparently, she felt like they'd betrayed the squad by changing the dynamic, by choosing each other over the group, and she'd actually written in the group chat, "They're all pulling an Ethan on me." That phrase got back to me, and I had to laugh, because the lack of self-awareness was stunning. She couldn't see that what Tasha and Finn were doing, prioritizing their relationship over constant group activities, was exactly what I'd been asking her to do for months. The squad that she'd valued over everything, over anniversaries and holidays and her actual relationship, was dissolving because, surprise, people grow up and their priorities change, and you can't expect everyone to put friend group dynamics above their own lives forever. 2 months after I moved out, Marissa texted me from a number I didn't have blocked. It was late at night, and the message just said she'd been thinking about everything and wondered if I'd be willing to meet for coffee. I didn't respond right away, sat with it for a couple days while I tried to figure out what I felt. There was a time when a text from her would have made my heart race, would have made me hope that maybe she finally understood, but now I just felt tired. A week later, she sent another message. "I've learned a lot over the past couple months. I understand now what you were trying to tell me. I'm ready to change if you'll give me another chance." I still didn't respond, because what was there to say? The relationship was over, had been over long before I actually moved out, and her sudden revelation now that her friend group was falling apart didn't change anything. I ran into her by accident about 3 months post-breakup at a restaurant downtown. I was there with Sarah, having dinner, and Marissa was sitting at the bar alone, which was the first time I'd ever seen her anywhere without at least one member of the squad attached to her hip. She was staring at her phone, scrolling through what looked like old photos, and there was something about her posture that looked defeated in a way I'd never seen before. She glanced up, saw me, and our eyes met across the restaurant. I watched her face cycle through surprise, then pain, then something like resignation. Sarah noticed me tense up and asked if I knew her, and I just said it was my ex and I'd handle it. Marissa stood up slowly, like she was giving herself time to change her mind, then walked over to our table. She stopped a few feet away, respectful of the space, and said, "Hey Ethan, I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner." Her voice was quieter than I remembered, less confident. I could see Sarah watching curiously but staying silent, and I appreciated that. Marissa looked at me, then at Sarah, then back at me, and took a deep breath before continuing. I need to say this, and then I'll leave you alone. You were right about everything. About the squad, about priorities, about all of it. I didn't see it until everyone started doing exactly what you did, choosing their relationships and their lives over constant group hangouts. And I'm sorry, really sorry, for not seeing it sooner, for not seeing you. There were tears in her eyes now, but she wasn't crying dramatically, just standing there being honest in a way she'd never been during our entire relationship. I looked at her for a long moment. This person I'd spent 2 years with, who I'd loved, who I'd tried so hard to reach, and I felt a mix of things, sympathy, sadness, but also a clarity I'd never had before. I said, "I appreciate you saying that, Marissa. I really do. I hope you figure things out," and I meant it, not in a bitter way, just in a genuine hope that she'd learn and grow from this. She nodded, wiped her eyes quickly, and said, "She seems nice. I hope she knows how lucky she is, And then she turned and walked back to the bar, grabbed her coat, and left the restaurant without looking back. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Didn't ask questions or make me explain, just let me process whatever I was feeling. As we left the restaurant later, I saw through the window that the bar stool where Marissa had been sitting was empty, her half-finished drink still sitting there. I thought about the squad, about how they'd all scattered in different directions, pursuing their own lives and relationships, leaving Marissa alone with the realization that friendships, even the closest ones, evolve and change and sometimes end. I thought about how I used to be that person waiting at home while she chose them over me, and how now she was the one sitting alone at bars, probably wondering where it all went wrong. Part of me felt bad for her, but a bigger part of me felt grateful that I'd had the strength to walk away when I did, that I'd refused to keep accepting being treated like an option. Sarah and I walked to her car, and she finally asked, "You okay?" And I realized I actually was, more okay than I'd been in years. I told her I was good, that seeing Marissa had given me closure I didn't know I needed, and it was true. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be treated like an option, and sometimes people only realize what they had after it's gone, and the important thing is that by the time they figure it out, you've already moved on to something better. I got in Sarah's car, and as we drove away, I didn't look back at the restaurant, didn't wonder what Marissa was doing or where she was going, because honestly, it wasn't my problem to solve anymore, and that felt like freedom. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.